Good afternoon to you. Mark Suttoth, HurricaneTrack.com here. Monday now, October the 9th, 2023. On the update today, we'll talk about 92L, the red area out there in the Atlantic. That'll probably go on to develop and give us a few more ace points. And then wind shear and climatology are going to win out. We're not supposed to get deep tropical development this time of year, not out that far anyway. So it'll be a fairly short-lived system. And then we have something trying to brew just a little bit of energy in the Bay of Campeche, southern Gulf of Mexico. That, combined with some energy coming across Mexico from eastern Pacific activity, is going to make for a squally, wet period for the northern Gulf Coast later in the week. So we'll talk about that and more in today's update. Glad you could tune in. Let's see what's happening. First of all, here's the Bay of Campeche disturbance. Shower and thunderstorm activity down there, changing little in organization. They outlooked this, as we call it, yesterday, and there is a small area of low pressure down there. Environmental conditions are only marginally favorable, and you'll understand why once I show you the satellite imagery, the loop there coming up in a minute. And then eventually the system's going to move northward and merge with a frontal system over the western Gulf, and then there's just going to be this big mess, like right up through here, over the next few days. We'll show you that as we go forward. Meanwhile, here's 92L out in the eastern Atlantic. Pretty certain this is going to go on to develop, but it'll stay out in the open ocean and not be a problem for anybody. Meanwhile, in the East Pac, here's Max making landfall right now in southern Mexico as a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Big rainmaker down here. You've got these mountain areas, all part of the Mexican geography. And so there's going to be some heavy rain in those mountains, so some flash flooding will certainly be a problem. And then we have to watch Lidia here, which is going to make landfall right up this area tomorrow as a fairly significant hurricane. It's not a hurricane yet, but it is expected to become a hurricane. And, of course, the mountain areas that it'll encounter, that can bring some very heavy rain and flash flooding, even the urban flooding in some of these areas. I've been to that area of Mexico a couple of years ago, almost exactly, for Pamela. So I kind of know this area a little bit anyway. And then, yes, to the south of where the, whoops, you can't even see that. Let's try again. Let's use sky blue. To the south of where the center comes in, there could be some storm surge and certainly some big waves down there in that part of the Pacific. Real quick, just looking at the discussion so we can get an idea of the wind speeds. It is expected to become a Category 2 before making landfall. So it will be a potent hurricane, and it'll be coming in hopefully during daylight hours tomorrow. That always helps, even if just a little bit. Here's what it all looks like on satellite animation, courtesy of Tropical Tidbits. There's Lidia, there's Max. Max is very small, making landfall. There's a small area of low pressure here in the Bay of Campeche. Some more energy trying to gather over here in the East Pac. Just a very busy area down here, which is expected this time of year. And then we just have to see, does this start to shift east some, giving rise to the possibility of a Central American gyre event later in the month that might try to develop something in the Western Caribbean. From time to time, the GFS in particular wants to hint at that in the very long range, but it's so far out that it's more of, oh, okay, let's see if that actually happens or if it moves up into time closer as we go forward in time in reality. Because remember, the modeling there, that's not reality. That is a bunch of mathematical equations and physics, and then the output is potential, but much, much lower the further out in time that you get. I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Check out, though, the upper level winds screaming across the northern Gulf, the central Gulf, and even close to the southern Gulf. So that'll decapitate any system down here that tries to get going. But this energy with Max and what will come in from Lidia, a lot of that is going to combine and give us a big chance of rain and some onshore flow, maybe some, I guess you could call it storm surge or just coastal flooding, especially for parts of coastal Mississippi over the next few days. We'll look at that closer and in more detail on the GFS in just a moment. Shifting the satellite animation to the east, there's 92L. That's pretty rare to see for October the 9th, this far out and this far south. I guess the south part makes sense because the tropical waves come off of Africa at a lower latitude the later in the season we get. But that's kind of a rare thing. And we'll see. I think it'll try to develop and just kind of meander up here in the east central Atlantic. And it might become a hurricane. You never know. It's also interesting to note, it seems to me that there's some dust right there, a Saharan air outbreak. You can see all the milky color through here in the very clear skies. So even in October, we still see the Saharan air layer. Now, that's an interesting large ocean storm up here, trying to acquire more subtropical characteristics, meaning more thunderstorms, deeper convection, banding. It's still spread out all that energy. Maybe the Hurricane Center will start to discuss it in the official tropical weather outlook tomorrow. We'll have to see. These types of systems, they're not overlooked just because you don't see them on the map as a yellow, an orange, or a red. It's not like the Hurricane Center goes, oh, we didn't know that that system was there northwest of the Azores. Some of those features that are not in the tropical weather outlook do get mentioned in the Tropical Analysis and Forecast branch, which is down at the National Hurricane Center, part of the Weather Forecast Office in Miami. And those systems, like that big gale center up there northwest of the Azores, do get mentioned in the TAF-B discussions, Tropical Analysis and Forecast branch in the marine discussions. Just a little pro tip for you, I guess. All right, so what do the models show? Well, let's take a look, first of all, at tiny little Max right there making landfall now. There's Lidia, and Lidia is going to make its way towards Mexico there, north of Puerto Vallarta, and it looks like it's going to deepen or strengthen pretty solidly, and then it just disappears. Why does it do that? Well, there are some serious mountains down here, and that circulation is just going to get eliminated at the low levels here. This is the 10-meter wind. You can see it a little bit better. Let's back it up one frame. Let's go up in the atmosphere. 5,000 feet, that's what it looks like, 850 millibars. A little bit of reflection of it still there, but the model isn't going to pick up. And I got to understand this one day, talking to some model experts. Why don't we ever see activity over mountainous areas? We don't see it in the Rockies, for example. It's just interesting. So it just makes these things look like, poof, they're gone. Notice, too, now this is 36 hours out, just a little bit of an impulse here in the western Gulf. And these other colors in here, this vorticity, that's energy in the atmosphere. And the Gulf of Mexico is still very warm. And so let's switch this over to the precip and moisture. And let's do this right here. Nope, that's not what I want. What do I want? Let me think. Let's see what are my choices here. Oh, I know what I need to do. I need to switch over to this version, and then we'll get back to the Western Gulf. I just got to remember which map extent I'm looking at. So before we look at the Western Gulf again, keep your eyes on this area, south of the Cabo Verde Islands. That's 92L. And yes, over the next couple of days, it does try to organize and intensify, and then it's going to run out of time because the wind shear and the dry air are going to get it, and it'll weaken. But there's a window there where it could strengthen, becoming a tropical storm. If it does, it'll be Sean, and then it might become a hurricane. You never know, especially these small systems. But now, let's switch the extent over to the western Atlantic, and we can see this energy over here starting to gather. This is 42 hours out. And again, all of these colors, you see the oranges and the yellows and whatnot, that's energy in the atmosphere. So now, looking at, well, it's interesting that it's still not giving me what I was looking for. So let's just do this. There it is. Maybe I'm just not with it today. That's all right. It's okay for me to not be with it. This at least shows us the 6-hour average precip rate. Of course, this is in millimeters per hour. But I like to look at this as, anything on the upper parts of the scale, when you're really starting to get into the colors of the Skittles, right? The rainbows. Anything out of the green, darker green and up, you really start to get some high rainfall rates for the 6-hour averaged, right? And so I see that, I think, man, that's a pretty big area of rain. That's how I look at this. And then you see this really spreading into the northern and central Gulf Coast, southern Louisiana, Mississippi, maybe even southern Alabama there, the Florida Panhandle. So yeah, the next couple of days is going to be kind of rocky down there. Luckily, just as a sort of aside, it's not coming up this way so that the onshore flow is just all shoved into that corner down there that Mississippi and Louisiana makes, that right angle, that's a little different trajectory when we're coming from the west-southwest this way, or southwest or whatever. You'll still get some onshore flow, maybe some coastal flooding, especially in Hancock County. Yep, that area is pretty prone to it, Waveland and vicinity. And you'll see some water rises down here, but it's not quite the same as if we had something traversing this way or coming up directly from the south. Nevertheless, a big rainmaker coming across. Real quick, what about the wind? I do know exactly what I'm looking for here. There we go. The winds are not too bad. This is 10 meters above the ground, and there's a little tiny area there of 34 knots out over the open Gulf, and you can pick out a couple of extra ones in there, those greens and the darker sea green or whatever you call that color. So, 25, 30 knots, something like that at the surface. Yeah, that's pretty good. That'll rough up the Mississippi Sound, and you got to be aware of that down there for sure. But nothing too substantial, and a lot of that energy is spread out over a fairly large area. And another reason behind why it's not going to do much, the upper level winds are just too strong, going right across the system at a very good clip there. Now, if we had something down here, that would be a whole different story, but we don't. So, no reason to even keep talking about it. All right, it is Monday, and I usually look at Mondays as we'll look at the news, kind of, the current stuff, and then some other things. And I wanted to just touch base on where we are. Sea surface temperature-wise, we're now getting into the latter part, the waning weeks of the hurricane season, so how are things looking? Still very warm compared to average across much of the Atlantic. Our cold wakes left behind from our hurricanes are slowly filling back in. We do have the El Nino out here, but it is just barely a significant El Nino. Not going to get into a long discussion about it today, but believe me when I tell you, looking at the different indices that we monitor these things, yes, the sea surface temperatures are warmer than average down there, and significantly so, but it's not quite as strong as some of the modeling was suggesting earlier in the summer, for example, and it's going to die away, it looks like, pretty quickly once we get into 2024, which, as you know how time flies, especially as you get older. When you're a kid, time seems to move slow, and when you're older, it moves faster. It's just weird like that. But 2024 is not that far away. And just a little tiny notice here, like right there, right off the coast of South America, a little bit of a chiseling away of those deep anomalies. Remember back in the summer, early summer, this was all colored in very, very, very solidly with these upper end anomalies, 4, 5, 6 degrees Celsius. It was just nuts. Well, as I talked about in a recent update, it's kind of been spread out over a larger area now. But I just think it's interesting. The El Nino is not going to be that long-lived, and we still have all this warm water. So we got a lot of hurricane season left to go, I believe. We're not done, not on the calendar and not in the real world. In fact, looking at water temperatures, actual temps, still pretty warm in the Gulf Stream. I mean, the eastern seaboard, unless something came racing up like Hazel in 1954, I wouldn't worry about too many major impacts going forward. It's not impossible, but we're getting to the point now where leftovers would be more of what I'd be concerned with. And those could bring some big impacts, don't get me wrong. I mean, just 5 years ago, the remnants of Michael came through, and that produced a storm surge on the sound side. Michael did, yeah. As it came through after landfall in Mexico Beach, the remnants put a sound side flood, even in Rodanthe, North Carolina, as an example. A few feet. I think it was like 4 feet or so, maybe more. Anyway, moving along, Gulf of Mexico temps still very warm. Starting to chisel away at it up here. Just getting to that sub 26 Celsius, or basically under 80 Fahrenheit. But the rest of the Gulf, especially down here, very, very warm. Still in the 30 Celsius range, so mid-80s or so. And these cold fronts will come down, the dry air will come down, the wind just blowing over the Gulf, that'll help to stir things up and cool things off. And then we start to watch for next year, how will things evolve. But we're not there yet. Hey, I also want to show you this. We haven't visited this chart in a while. A little piece of energy down here. I probably should have put this tab like over here somewhere, but that's okay. we'll look at it now. So yeah, this little piece of energy here, that's what we got to watch. There's Max, there's Lidia, and all this is going to try to get together over here and then head up this way, as we pointed out, in a big hodgepodge. So we got to watch for that. But that's where that source energy is coming from, part of it anyway, right there. Then we have 92L. That's what these look like. Yeah, that's what we look for with these systems in the deep tropics. That's bundling the energy, but it is spread out over a pretty big area. That's that area of non-tropical activity way up in the North Atlantic there, northwest of the Azores. Now, talking about the El Nino, this is what we will definitely be watching probably every week or so in the off season. This is the subsurface anomaly chart, or whatever you want to call it, animation. And we use purple here to make everything pop. Earlier, this is back in August, we had a pretty robust subsurface warm pool, but look at what has happened. We're now developing these areas of cool anomalies in the subsurface. None of this right here is over here to get moved over to the east. Bottom line, the El Nino is going to be gone, I'm almost certain of it, by next summer, and that warm water pattern in the North Atlantic looks like it's going to stay. We might have a very busy hurricane season next year. I know we're still in this year, but these kinds of things are very easy to see. These large pieces of the puzzle, I was explaining to a gentleman yesterday at a friend of my son's house about how all of this works, and he was pretty fascinated with it. Very big puzzle pieces here. This will still shape the winter ahead. We still have the El Nino in front of us. We still have, 6 weeks or whatever of hurricane season left, maybe more. But looking ahead to next year, this kind of stuff's really interesting to see. You know what else is interesting? This is coming up this weekend, the annular eclipse. GreatAmericanEclipse.com. Bookmark it, check it out. Check out that crossroads. Speaking of checking it out, I tell you what, that part of Texas there hit the jackpot for solar eclipse activity for sure. You're going to get the annular eclipse on Saturday. That's where the moon covers almost the entire disk of the sun, and you can really understand that right there. That's what it should look like. I say should, cloud cover notwithstanding, right? And then next April on the 8th, oh my goodness, if you have never seen a total solar eclipse, if you're right there and you're at 99% and you're like, that's fine, I'll see it, you're wrong. There is nothing like 100%. It's the same thing like in, let's just pick an NFL game for the Super Bowl, and the team that lost the Super Bowl only lost by 1. Nobody says, well, you almost won the Super Bowl. What's 1 point matter? It matters everything. Like the guy that maybe was going to kick the field goal to win the whole thing and he missed. He came close. You're only down 1, whatever. It's everything. And that's the same thing with totality. That's next year, though. But this weekend, in parts of the western United States, northwest, down through the Rockies, parts of the southern Rockies, and then through Texas, the annular eclipse will take place, and I will be roughly right there in the Midland, Odessa area on Saturday. I'm going to take a special camera. Hopefully I can stream it all live. There'll be lots of coverage from lots of people. Fox Weather's going to be on it as well, but I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be really neat. But yeah, check out the website here, GreatAmericanEclipse.com. Lots of good info. In fact, there you go. That's what it's going to look like on Saturday. In other parts of the country, depending on where you are, that's what yours will look like. So, heck of a website. I'm very impressed with it. We used it back in 2017 a lot for that total solar eclipse that I saw with some of my kids and some other folks, some HurricaneTrack friends in South Carolina. They invited us to see that one. I mean, it was unbelievable. I totally understand now why civilizations were in conflict with each other after or during a total solar eclipse thousands of years ago, because it is mesmerizing beyond description. Anyway, that's coming up Saturday. I'll talk more about it as the week progresses. We'll take a look at some cloud forecasts and make sure we can hopefully see it. I'll drive wherever I have to, within reason anyway, right? But yeah, we'll get to that. We'll talk about it more later. You know what? Tomorrow, also I'm going to talk about the 5-year anniversary of Michael, probably still our greatest triumph in terms of setting up our cameras and so forth. So I'm going to revisit that a little bit tomorrow. Hurricane Michael, and we'll, of course, keep talking about the busy tropics. Until then, you guys have a good rest of your Monday. As always, thanks for tuning in and paying attention to what I have to say. I appreciate it. From all of us at Hurricane Track, the back-end team, our supporters over at Patreon, every one of us, we all appreciate you. I'm Mark Sudduth, Hurricane Track. We'll talk some more tomorrow.